Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, or good lunchtime where Rene is. I think we've just lost Nick for a minute or two, but I'm sure he'll be back with us in a second. Rene, how are you doing on this fine Monday lunchtime?
I'm doing great. I mean, look, anytime a Grand Slam has finished, I'm a little sad because I'm like, oh, I've got nothing to wake up to and watch and be nervous about. And unbelievably, for the French Open this year, it felt like here in the US, it was on all day. It was on all day. It was on all night. I came home from being out all day. I was like, oh, match is still on. This is crazy. So in and of itself, I'm not a fan of the nighttime scheduling at the French. I just feel like I don't know why. It's like, it feels like the French Open just should be a daytime tournament. But the French Federation are trying to reap back some of that COVID money, I would say. So they're selling, those separate night tickets with not one female match during the 2 weeks, which was
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that, actually.
well, I mean, we all know that the one match that should have been played at night without question. And the only thing I can think of why it didn't happen was, of course, arguably one of the matches of the tournament in Iga Swiatek playing against Naomi Osaka. And the only thing I can think of is that Iga maybe requested not to play in the night. I mean, she's the 3-time defending champion, 2-time defending champion at that point, but 3-time champion of the French Open. And maybe, just maybe, she put in a little word to Emily Mauresmo or to the tournament to say, please don't play this match at night. I don't know, worried about it being indoors, it being heavier. I don't know. I haven't talked to the Swiatek camp, so I don't know if they maybe did request. But if they did not request, that match should have been at night. There's no question. Maybe they thought Naomi wasn't going to give it a match, but it doesn't matter. Arguably two of the most well-known tennis players in the last 10 years on the women's tour should have had the night session that particular night. And it would have been an incredible experience for those people paying tickets at night.
I think the obvious place to start would be the final, but actually, because you've mentioned that match, I do want to just get your quick thoughts on what it was. It was an epic encounter between Naomi and Iga, and some people sort of have called it the final in a way because it was just so special.
Yeah. Well, John, I don't know if you follow me on Twitter, but I did say literally the moment that match finished, I said, that's it. She's rolling through the entire draw after that. I didn't think there was anyone that was going to be able to possibly beat her, except maybe Sabalenka, just because Sabalenka had pushed her a few times on the clay leading into the French Open. I certainly think that Rybakina at her best can push Iga sometimes, but on the clay, particularly in Paris, it's just, if you've ever played on the courts there, they're just so absolutely perfect. The way to be able to play on red clay, it is a little bit different in every other, like Madrid and Rome. It's a bit slipperier. It's a little coarser, the clay, whereas on the French Open, it's so perfect. And I just think Naomi, having that match played indoors, people don't talk about enough. A lot of the matches early on were clearly played indoors on the two biggest courts because of the rain and the horrible weather in Paris. So I think playing indoors helped Naomi. There's still conditions. She could serve big. She could go after the return. She could clock the ground strokes without any wind to sort of move the ball around, and when there's wind as a clay court player and someone like Iga, she can throw the ball up with a bit of spin. She can use the wind to help her, have her top spin ball bounce off the court more. But in heavier indoor conditions, that ball isn't going to bounce as much. It's another reason why it absolutely stunk for Nadal, not only to play Zverev first round, but to play him indoors. And I mean, everyone's like, well, it was 3 sets. It was easy. Guys, Nadal served for the second set and he was up a break in the third. And if that's outdoors on a faster, hard, bouncier court, maybe Rafa wins a set or two there. I don't know. So I just think playing indoors really helped Naomi. But the fact that Iga got through that match, as soon as she got through that match, I tweeted out, I just said, that's it. She's rolling through everybody else because seeing her cry after that match and the stress relief that she let go of once she won that match, to me, that was an indicator also of she knew. Look, I don't know if she looks all the way through the tournament, like who's in her section of the draw, etc. But who's in your section of the draw because if you play on one day and Rybakina and Sabalenka are playing on another, you go, okay, they're in the bottom half of the draw. The number 2 seeds in the bottom half of the draw, but you don't know who 3 or 4 is and where are they in the draw. But when you know the schedule, they're on the other half. So I think she just knew there was nobody in her half of the draw that was going to push her. Maybe in the final, but then, of course, we know what happened in the other half of the draw. So I just think Iga just knew once that match was over, oh, my God, I dodged a bullet and I'm not losing now.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right there, because something about that match with Naomi, I think, woke something in Swiatek up, because if you look at sort of compared to her 2023 run, it wasn't as convincing. Here, it was like 2022 all over again, where she was hitting winners all over the court. She was moving her opponents around. She was playing almost perfect.
Well, she said that actually, Nick. She actually
Yeah.
said that in her post-match interview at one time, I think after maybe the semi-final. She just said, I feel like, or maybe it was after she won, she just said, I felt like this was 2022. Like, she just felt like she was on such a roll and playing so well. And interesting, will Swiatek win Wimbledon 2024? And a lot of people think yes. I think my favorite to win that tournament, and I just said it on another podcast, is Rybakina. I think the Rybakina, if she stays healthy, and that's been the big question mark for her over the last, it feels like 2 years. Whether it's injuries or sickness or whatever it is. I just feel like if she's serving well, her accuracy on her ground strokes, they're just so big. And if she gets the confidence like she did a couple of years ago when she won the tournament, I think she's going to be really hard to beat. Sabalenka obviously is going to be very hard to beat at Wimbledon. Iga's going to have perfect conditions there. Grass is not something she's comfortable on. She's spoken about it. I've spoken to her about it. I think she can get there, but she's going to have to change up a little bit of the way she plays. And for me, if they're confident, Rybakina and Sabalenka are the two favorites. And look, Ons Jabeur's made the final there twice. And Ons has played a little bit better over the last 6 months. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I like that people are supporting Swiatek here at Wimbledon. Not sure what happened to the guys. Maybe this is my show now.
Okay, I'm here. Don't worry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, John.
I was just about to actually share your podcast on the screen anyway, so you can actually remind us of the name of that podcast.
Yeah, well, I'm doing. Well, of course, my podcast is called the Renee Stubbs, very original tennis podcast, and but I'm also doing a podcast called The French Connection, which is linked to my website and also to my podcast. I'm doing it with Sam Querrey. We've been doing something with NBC Sports and Racket. Bringing you a little bit of a tie-in between the French Open and, of course, the Olympics back in Paris. So I've been working with NBC on that. So they can just go to my bio and or to my website and pick it up. But it's been fun. We actually interviewed Jewel Lloyd today, who's a WNBA player. She's a lover of tennis, grew up playing tennis. And so it's interesting to hear someone who's so good in their sport talk about their love of tennis. And Sam and I obviously go over what happened in Paris, and we preview who our favorites are at Wimbledon.
Okay, let's look at the final. Did it kind of go as we all feared or expected, in that it was, 3 games, I think, Paolini won, and that was probably kind of what we were, as I say, a bit worried about that, weren't we?
Yeah, look, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, this is the way tennis works. It's about matchups, right? And Jasmine Paolini is a great clay court player. I have watched this kid play for years. She is, if you have listened to my podcast, I've said on many occasions, she is literally my favorite player to watch. I love her personality. I love the way she plays. Her talent is so obvious. I watched her play I think the first time I saw her play was years and years ago in a smaller tournament in Prague during the pandemic, actually. And I thought, who's this kid? Oh my God, she's so good. She hits the ball great. She's tiny, which doesn't help her. But there's nothing in her game that she's weak at. She hits, beautiful variety, hits the living daylights out of the ball for someone so small. But she's a great mover on clay. And people don't realize how important clay court movement is. To be able to, slide out to a ball to get one more back. That's what she did against Sabalenka. She was able to, against Rybakina. She was able to force her play one more ball because she can move so well on clay. And then she also has the power to hit through you. So for me, I mean, the victory for Paolini in that match, and then, of course, Andreeva, what she was able to do against Sabalenka. But look, Sabalenka was not feeling well. There's no question about that. So we kind of got a little bit robbed, I think, because of that. Sabalenka not feeling great, similar to what happened to Ruud. But she deserved to be there. But the problem is the matchups against a big hitter are great, right? Because you can get one more ball back. You can frustrate your opponent. And when Rybakina and Sabalenka, for example, types of players, they hit the ball really flat. If they just get a little bit off or a little bit tight, they miss. Whereas Iga has the rotation on the ball. She still hits the crap out of the ball. Iga Swiatek hits the ball as hard as any of those players. Sabalenka, Rybakina. It just doesn't look as big but because she puts a little bit more spin on the ball, she's able to get the ball out of Paolini's hitting zone. She's able to move as well as Paolini. She does everything Paolini does, but just better.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on Rybakina and Sabalenka as well, because they went out within just a few hours of each other.
Yep.
And given what happened in that Osaka-Iga match, did you feel as though, as exciting as those matches were, that couple of hours kind of shaped the last few days of the women's side of the French Open?
Well, I think what it shaped, John, was more about the fact that you never know, right? A tennis, particularly on, the natural surfaces like clay and grass, there's such a nuance to being able to play on clay, such a nuance to be able to play on grass, whether it be the movement on grass and the movement on clay. And we don't talk about the movement enough. On hard court, it's pretty basic for everyone, right? You run, you try and get there, you push back, and you get back into the court. Obviously, we've seen this development of sliding on hard court, something that Iga Swiatek does so well, something that Coco does well, like Sinner. I mean, these guys are sliding on hard court. It's ridiculous. But the way they move on clay is so exceptional and so different. And when you see a player that moves really well on clay, and then you see a player that doesn't move so well on clay, you see the little nuances are the reasons why certain people win on clay over others. And, Serena was decently a mover on clay, not too bad. She could slide, but she wasn't as comfortable. And so she's having to hit 2 extra winners on clay against someone like, for example, an Iga Swiatek or a Justine Henin, where they had some amazing matches on clay. And Justine was one of the greatest movers I've ever seen on clay. Very similar to Seffi, very similar to Iga, Roger and Rafa and Novak. They all move so beautifully on clay. So there's something to be said about being able to move a certain way on the natural surfaces. And Roger Federer is somebody who's so perfectly illustrated that on grass. You never see that dude fall over on grass because he understood the greener part of the court. You have to be really light. You can't push hard. You have to give up sometimes on certain movements, but you have to learn how to move on them. And Iga is just so unbelievably good on clay with her movement. And there's not enough credit given to that. And Paolini is the same way, but she just doesn't have the power to be able to out-hit Iga, whereas Iga can get 1 or 2 balls back as well against Sabalenka and Rybakina and then crush a winner.
What are you like as a slider?
One of the things I got to tell you, John, one of the things that I actually loved about clay was moving on it. Like I loved to slide. And maybe someone who was Australian, you're like, huh? You didn't have clay courts? Well, we had really crappy sand courts, and we had this thing called synthetic grass. And you as a Brit would know, you put the sand down on synthetic grass and you could slide for days. So I learned to play on those surfaces. And so I could slide for days. The problem is I didn't have the patience for clay. So my movement was great. My tennis wasn't as good on clay as it was on a hard court or on certainly a fast court like grass or indoors.
Just so Nick is up to speed, I'm going to just basically I want a big kind of overall thought on Iga, her achievement, her standing in the game, and maybe even one eye on the grass court season. And then Nick can also take you on to Mirra Andreeva, because I think we need to talk about her as well. But first of all, give us your big picture on Iga and her standing within the game right now.
Look, I mean, I just had a question posed to me and to Sam Query. We're doing this podcast together called The French Connection. And, we said I asked him who he thought was going to win more Grand Slams between Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz. And he said he thinks Iga. And that sort of surprised me in some ways, just because clearly Carlos Alcaraz has shown that he can win on every surface. This is incredible what he's done at his age to win on all 3 of the surfaces, hard court, clay, and grass. Iga hasn't been quite as dominant, clearly, on the hard court, the fast courts at Wimbledon, Australian Open. She's won a US Open, which I'm sure has to give her some kind of, positivity going into a fast court. But, we've had some great interviews with Lindsay Vaughan. We had Jill Lloyd today, another WNBA great, talking about her love of tennis. So I love talking to other sports athletes about their love of tennis. And I don't know if you follow Lindsay Vaughan, but she loves to post her videos on tennis. But the thing about Iga is that she just is so dominant on clay. It's just unheard of. I I really predict that she will have the most French Opens of any woman, and that's saying something because Chris Evert won a lot. But I think that she can get upwards of 10 Grand Slams at the French Open. I really do. As long as she stays healthy and happy. She's a real anxious Nelly. So, at some point, the nerves start to fray on you. It's just a natural thing that happens. But I just think, Carlos and Iga are going to be around for another 10, 12 years, hopefully, injury-free. But on clay, this young woman is just so exceptional. Her movement, her ball flight, her kick serve, everything about her. And she's so comfortable there. And when you become comfortable on a surface like she has, like Rafa did at the French, you just walk into the French Open every time and you just feel good. I know she came ever so close to losing to Osaka. But that was a Naomi Osaka we haven't seen for a while. And indoors is a very different proponent to playing outdoors on clay. And so I think that helped Naomi. But the fact that Iga found a way to get through that match and then just crush everybody else is just indicative of how good this young woman is on this surface.
Nick as well, still having a few technical issues there. Listen,
I completely agree.
Got to get better wireless, Nick.
I know. Don't worry.
You, John, you're in England and you have better. What are you in a player restaurant?
Actually, no, I'm in Germany. Actually, just
in Germany
here. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I'm just over the border in the Netherlands. Hopefully, nobody's listening. But anyway, yeah. Okay, listen, Mirra Andreeva. I do want to get your thoughts on her because she was obviously very much a part of that sort of couple of hours that I was talking about. I mean, this was another incredible step forward for her, right?
Yeah, I'm. Look, we've been impressed with this young woman for a long time. I think the best move she made in the last 12 months is employing, the last probably 3 or 4 months is employing Conchita Martinez. There's just not enough said in the importance of the people that you choose around them. It was something that Carlos Alcaraz talked about on the desk at Tennis Channel. He said, you've got to surround yourself with the right people. You've got to have the right coaches. You have to have the right support system. And he has that. He has had that now for a number of years. And I think the best thing for Andreeva is that she has Conchita now in her corner. This is someone who, as we know, has won a Grand Slam herself at Wimbledon. She was an exceptional clay court player, we know. And Conchita could play on any surface. So I think to have that responsibility, I know Conchita as a coach. She actually coached me a little bit in my last couple of years of my career.
Okay.
I had her help me out. We're very good friends. And I just said, look, I know you're a little bored. I need a little help. You want to come and help me? And she did. And I've always appreciated that. So I know what type of a coach she is. I also worked with her in tandem when we were working with Karolina Pliskova together as a coaching team. I actually said, Conchita, I couldn't do the Grand Slam. So I had Conchita come in and work with Karolina during those Grand Slams just because I was working my day job for ESPN. It was a bit tough. So I trust Conchita as much as anyone to bring the best out in Mirra Andreeva, and she has shown that. And Andreeva is really smart. She's super young, 17 years of age. But the thing I liked about Mirra is that she handled herself with composure this year. If you remember back, I believe it was last year, she won the first set against Coco and lost her absolute you-know-what in the first game of the second set. Started throwing a racket, and I was like, what are you doing? You're up a set. Like, pick your racket up. You're doing fine. She was 16 years of age. She didn't know hand to hand on the moment. And what I noticed with her here at this tournament is that she has improved on that exponentially. So for me, once she gets, the behavior issues, which she's doing, under control, the rest, will take care of itself. And Conchi will work her hard. She's a hard worker as a coach. And she just brings so much excitement to the game. She's strong. There's nothing that she doesn't do well. And she can only get better at everything that she does. And she's a great young personality. Look at that post-match interview where she's like, I kind of forgot everything my coach told me. But she has a really good mind of her own. So she's able to think out there. But she couldn't do that when she was losing her you-know-what. Like, I don't care who you are, how smart you are, how capable you are. If you're losing your stuff on the court, you're not able to be clear on what you want to do. And what I saw from her this year was a lot of clarity and a lot of composure, and it will only get better. We saw her start crying in the semifinals against Jasmine, and understandable. It's the first Grand Slam semifinal, as was for Paulina, but Paulina is 28 years of age. And 11 years is a long time in tennis when it comes to exposure to big matches. And so, Paulina won a WTA 1000. Like, this was a really good player coming into the tournament. So for Andreeva, I'm very excited about this young woman because I think she's going to be really good.
I have a question, Renee, about this sort of overwhelming feeling that Mirra clearly had in the semi-final. Have you ever been there, either yourself, or have you seen an opponent, maybe a 17-year-old opponent, who is really struggling at all?
Look, I mean, it's so you can't buy experience. You have to go through these moments. I don't know if you remembered Naomi Osaka just collapsing against Madison Keys years and years ago at the US Open. I was commentating the match. She was up, I believe, 5-1 in the third against Maddie Keys and lost the match and bawled her eyes out, like just couldn't handle the moment, walked off the court, was just a mess, it was watching a train wreck, watching this match, and then what do you know, 2 years later, comes back, wins the tournament. So because she was, I believe, 17 years of age as well. It's a lot for a young kid to be able to take that moment. And they're young. They're going to cry. Like, this is their emotions coming out. And the guys might get angry and like throw the racket and get a little bit upset and sort of gesture at their people. Whereas, girls, some of them are a little bit more emotional and it comes out that way, right? It gets a little petulant. And you saw that with Naomi years before, and you saw it with Andreeva last year, and you see her improvement already this year. So as a coach, as an advisor, as a friend, you just say to them, you're going to be okay. Like, these are moments you have to go through as a player. I have no idea what it's like to be great at 17 and be on the semifinals or on a big stage like that by myself. Absolutely no chance. I mean, at 17, I was like trying to figure out if I still could be good enough as a pro. So what she's doing already is exceptional. What Martina Hingis did at 16, 17 years of age will probably never be seen again. What Coco's done at her young age, but Coco is able to control her emotions a little bit more than most. And she's I don't want to, it's going to sound terrible, but like Mirra kind of goes back at her mom, tells her to leave. You don't see Coco sort of acting that way. So it's just a different personality. Mirra is just a little bit more fired up, and Coco is a little bit more tame, a little bit more sort of experienced. So it will come with time. And, as I said, as an advisor and coach, you just let them learn. They have to learn from their own experiences. And that's what she did this week.
Over to you, Nick. Are you okay?
Yeah, all good. Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. You've got 3 options, Nick, and they're all open to you. You can either take us in a Coco direction, you can either take us in a Rybakina direction, or a Sabalenka. The floor is yours, Nick.
All right. Okay. Well, sorry I couldn't. I had a few more Iga and Mirra questions, but we are obviously short for time. Let's go with Coco. So I think we thought that if Iga was going to win Roland Garros, she would have to get through her closest rival. And originally we thought that was going to be Sabalenka. Maybe it ended up being Osaka. But if you looked at the rankings, it's now Coco Gauff, who is world number 2. Which I think we were talking about this possibility after Madrid, but Sabalenka kind of got enough points to hold on to that. But would you say that Coco is where would you say Coco's at the minute? Is number 2 kind of an accurate reflection of where she is at the minute?
Well, I mean, listen, I always say this to people. It's like the ranking is the ranking. The ranking is about a 12-month rotation of points, right? So Coco has the US Open Grand Slam victory on the ranking list right now. She has those 2,000 points, as does Sabalenka, right? And so Iga had to defend her French Open to keep those points, as she did. And, Coco lost first round at Wimbledon. So she has a ton of points to be able to make up there if she does well at Wimbledon. And someone like, on Vondrousova, for example, has 2,000 points coming off at Wimbledon. So she better do well there, or, she's going to drop down in the rankings. And that's how it is. It's a 12-month rotation of points, which means that Coco, up to this point, has been the most consistent number 2 player on the WTA tour, right? Iga has been the most consistent, best player on the tour over the last 12 months, meaning some people might only watch Wimbledon, the US Open, the French Open, the Australian Open. But guess what, guys? There are many, many tournaments in between, and a lot of those are WTA 1000s where 1,000 points is available. Grand Slams is 2,000 points. So if you win 2 WTA 1000s, you're winning the equivalency of a Grand Slam. And Coco won Cincinnati, 1,000 points. Won the US Open, 2,000 points. Made the semifinals of the Australian Open. Made the semifinals of the French Open. That is equivalent to, I believe, 750 points. I'm not quite sure how many points you get in the semifinals of a Grand Slam. But when you accumulate, and she won DC, like when you accumulate all those points, your ranking rises. And so she is number 2 in the world because she's been the second most consistent player right now, today, over the 12-month period. And so I have no problem with that. She is deserved of the number 2 spot and happy to see her get there. Clearly, she is hoping she doesn't have to run into Iga until the final now of a Grand Slam, which will possibly happen at Wimbledon if they make the final. And then we'll see. But it's up to Rybakina to be a little bit more consistent, and it's up to Sabalenka. She's going to have to, if Sabalenka does well at Wimbledon and, Coco doesn't do well at Wimbledon, she could take that spot back. But there's a lot of points up for grab in between now and the US Open for both of those players. And actually also for Iga, because Iga did not win the US Open last year and lost in the semifinal. So there's a lot on the line for all these 3 players. They have a lot. We'll see who ends up being number 1 at the end of the year.
Oh yeah, for sure. I do think that it's going to be difficult to catch Iga at this point. It has to be. So I think Iga would have to have a real drop off the rest of the year because she's got a 4,000 point buffer almost to Gauff and Sabalenka. But I think
listen, crazier things have happened. For example, if Iga loses first round of Wimbledon, possible, and Coco wins the tournament, that's a 2,000 point. That's, a 2,000 point ad for Coco, and Iga will drop off her quarterfinal points, which are probably about 400 points or something like that. So everyone has to understand the way the point system works. It's very important for that. And instead of being like, oh, she doesn't deserve this and she doesn't deserve that, and Iga, and Sabalenka, it's like, no, guys, this is the way the system works. You might not like it, but for me, it's the indicative of who has played the best over 12 months.
And it's indicative of how good someone is at getting the wins. And regardless of how you feel about the way that she's done it, Coco gets wins, and she's one of the best out there at doing that. That's how the point system works, as you've been saying. And I honestly think that consistency and finding a way to just get the win is an underrated trait in tennis.
Absolutely. And I have this fight on Twitter all the time, or X, with some of the people that come back and forth at me, and like I'm, having a conversation or a Twitter fight, let's call it not a fight, but a conversation with somebody about, they don't like Iga. She's not entertaining. She's boring. She's awkward. It's like, that is who she is. You're not going to change somebody's personality. I mean, imagine back in the day when Steffi Graf was playing, the same thing would be saying about her. Oh, she's a robot. She's got no personality, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is just who they are as people. Not everybody can be as exciting and interesting and as fun and as adorable on the court as Carlos Alcaraz. Like, the guy is exceptional, right? But, a lot of people didn't like Novak, the way he acts on the court. But you have to appreciate the way that somebody plays tennis. And for me, the way that she hits the ball as big as any of these women. She just doesn't have that reputation, because everyone thinks that Sabalenka and Rybakina, for example, just hit the crap out of the ball. It's like, guys, Iga is hitting the ball as hard. You just don't understand tennis if you don't know that. So for me, it's a little bit hard. And also for Coco, I had someone put on Twitter, how did this girl win the US Open? I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, the crowd, helps Sabalenka. It's like, listen, this is part of the sport. Part of the sport is dealing with it. Bianca Andreescu had that is one of the loudest crowds I've ever heard in my life when Bianca Andreescu won the US Open against Serena. To the point where Bianca had to put her fingers in her ears, I believe, at 5-5 in the second set because the crowd was so loud. Island Tomljanovic had to play Serena in the loudest atmosphere I've ever heard at the US Open. It is part of the sport. right? And so if you can't handle that, that's your problem, and Coco had a lot of pressure on her. Bianca came into the finals having won Canada and then beat Serena in that match. I mean, it is part of the sport is to be able to handle the pressure and to be able to handle crowds. No one likes playing anyone French in Paris. It's a nightmare. No one likes necessarily playing someone who's English at Wimbledon. And certainly no one's going to like playing Coco Gauff at the US Open. And going in there, that is part of it. But also Coco had to overcome being the favorite for the title for one of the first times in her career. And she would manage to do it. And for me, with her kinks in her forehand, and she has some issues technically on the forehand, there's no doubt about it. She has some technical difficulties on the second serve as well. This kid handles the pressure and handles all the BS coming her way on social media and from pundits as well as anyone I've ever seen. And she said it. And when you think it doesn't affect her, when she says in the microphone, which part of me wishes she hadn't said it, and part of me is glad that she did say it. It's like, all the haters out there, you fueled me. To the point that Brianna Stewart, one of the best WNBA players in the world, one of the best basketball players in the world, put that quote on her shoe, inside the tongue of her new Puma shoe, because she was like, good for you, because she's also had hate on social media. So I just think what these players deal with, social media-wise, in the public, it's incredible. And how Coco handles herself is exceptional, and we should be so happy to have someone like her in the game. And Iga, both of them are great kids, and I can say that because they're half my age.
Yeah, I tell you what, I completely agree with everything you've said there, and I was super impressed with how Gauff won that US Open, as you said, as the favorite. It just seemed like her time, and she managed that occasion so well. And I think that's one of the reasons why she's always going to be someone to beat at the US Open.
I know that you're a fan of Andrea Pekovic, and she wrote a great thing on her Substack today. And matchups are very important in tennis. And just like Paolini can match up against a Sabalenka or a Rybakina because they're hitting big because she makes them play one more ball. It's pretty similar to what Arantxa Sanchez Vicario used to do to a lot of players. Just frustrate them, make them play one more ball. Iga, her matchup against Coco is great because just the way that they play, that's just the way it is. And, I hope everyone takes a minute out of their day to read Andrea's piece today that she released, because it's fantastic. Just the nuances of the game, the matchups in tennis. And at the very end, she says something very nice about Iga, and basically telling everyone to get over the fact that she's not, in their eyes, an interesting person. She's an incredibly shy person. And for her to get out there in front of thousands of people and deal with the pressure of being the favorite and winning it, is amazing. And as Andrea, as a former player, knows what she's doing is very exceptional. So I hope everyone takes a minute out of their day to click on that link and to read Andrea's piece, because it's really well written.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go read that now, because I hadn't realized I can't today, so I'm going to go read that. Sounds very similar to a piece that Kira, who is part of our team here, wrote, talking about how actually Iga's introvertedness is one of her strengths.
People should embrace that. I mean, can you imagine having someone so introverted and so shy going out there, just like Steffi Graf, very similar to Monica Seles. Those three players in and of themselves would rather be in a corner reading a book than out there doing that. But they love this sport, and they put on a great show every time. And arguably that match against Osaka, one of the great matches we've seen over the last few years.
Oh, for sure. Actually, this is a question I wanted to ask you before the technical difficulties. But on Iga's streak, would you say, because she's currently on 19 match winning streak, and she saved 2 match points in that streak, one against Sabalenka, one against Osaka. Is that as impressive or more impressive than her 37 match barely challenged streak?
Oh, yeah. I think both are exceptional. It's hard. It's like picking a favorite child or picking your favorite Grand Slam that you won. I think they're both exceptional. I think they are, her handling the pressure, her handling the responsibility of being the best at that time. It's pretty amazing. To do what she did with the 37 match win streak was unbelievable. Because also she took over the number 1 ranking. There was all that pressure on her when Ash Barty retired, and everyone was like, well, who's, Iga? Is she that good? And it's like, oh yeah, she's really good. So I think that was pretty exceptional, but also, the other streak is phenomenal. I just think, I obviously know her. So I know all of these women personally. And so when people say things about them on social media, it sort of cuts me a little bit differently, because I know that they just, first of all, they, in a lot of instances, don't know what they're talking about. And I know it's their own personal, I have my own opinion and all that sort of stuff, but, make your opinion a little bit more nuanced and understand people. And when people are doing what they're doing in the way that they're doing it, just appreciate it. And that's what I try and do with someone like Iga Swiatek.
I think you have to. I mean, I actually watched the final against Paolini with 2 friends of mine, one of whom big tennis fan. Let's say tennis fan, but because we live in England, only really watched Wimbledon due to access to tennis that we have here. And so she actually hadn't seen Iga play before, but I had access to the French Open finals, so showed them it. And I think what we came away from watching that was how impressed just watching her play tennis they were. And that's sort of something that you, as tennis enthusiasts, experience. And I think we don't often appreciate, to be honest.
And when she was down match points in a lot of her tournaments this year, or down heavily in matches, she doesn't pull back. Like the match points that she saved against Sabalenka in Madrid, I believe, the 2, she hit 2 clean winners. She didn't wait for an error. She went, I'm going big with my serve out wide, and I'm crushing the open court, right? Even when you watch the match against Naomi, she's still going for the ball when she's at the most difficult points of a match. She's still going for a winner. And that, to me, is incredible. She's not pushing it. She's not waiting for them to make an error because they might get tight, which everyone does on match point. And you sort of hope. But she doesn't. She pulls the trigger. And I love that about her. She'll go in, she'll hit a swinging ball out of the air, and she won't maybe, hit it into the fat part of the court. She hits it this close to the line on all occasions. So me as a tennis player, when I see that, I go, oh, it didn't need to be that close to the line, but that's Iga. That's what she does. And that's why she's so good. She doesn't pull back. She goes for it. And, she might not be interesting for certain people. And that's your own personal opinion. Go for it. But for me as a tennis expert and pundit, I am so in awe and in shock, literally in awe of the way that she plays tennis.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone play like she does. As you said, like the way the ball plays with the lines, it's what attracts me so much to her style of tennis. The fact it does that, sort of like, how on earth that ball drop in? How does it kick so far that player's range? I guess we've kind of gone back onto Swiatek here, but I did want to ask, and feel free to come in on like that point after this question, but she's already being compared to Evert, Graf, Selesh, and Enan in terms of clay court prowess.
Yeah.
What is it that she has in common with them, other than 4 Roland Garros titles?
Work ethic. An incredible movement on clay. All of them did, except maybe Monica wasn't the greatest mover on clay, but Monica was the originator of just, taking the ball, hitting it into the corners, and just being so tenacious and gritty. And Iga is so gritty. They're all incredible. It's hard to compare them. And we asked a question on my podcast about who would you pick of all of those players. I think the list was Enna, Graf, Evert, and Iga, of who you would pick to play a match for you on clay for your life. And I asked that question to Andy Roddick, and I think a lot of the consensus was Steffi. I would take Steffi to play a match for me on my life. But I also edged Celis on clay because I watched personally in Steffi's box the 1992 final that I think was 10-8 in the third, with Monica beating Steffi in that match. Monica was unbelievable on clay, and so was Justine. And a lot of it is just the tenacity, and that's the saying at the French Open. Those who are the most tenacious will win, basically. They all had that. The two people on screen were two of the greatest competitors I've ever seen. And they weren't about the pomp and ceremony, other than, Monica throwing out roses to people when she was like 16, coming out into the French Open, which is one of the most iconic moments in sports. And people don't know that story much unless you were around then. But Monica and Steffi, they were just so tenacious on the court against one another. And that final is one of the greatest finals I've ever seen. And so, yeah, that's what they all have in common. They're just incredible players on clay, incredible movers, and they're so gritty and incredible. And Chrissy, of course, is one of the most unbelievable records on clay we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think even Iga will struggle to match her efforts overall clay record.
I think all of these players, at their absolute prime on clay, every match would be 10-8 in the third because they're that good.
Oh, for sure, and that would be fun to think about.
Although interestingly, though, Nick, that's where tennis matchups are really interesting for me, because when I think about the way Steffi played, I think Steffi would give Iga a lot more problems, and I think Iga would match up better against Monica, right? Because Iga doesn't like the slice backhand, which is why she hated playing Ash Barty, right? So there's little things that are always part of tennis. There's always matchups, and so you never know, right? So that's why I love this sport so much, because it is really about matchups in tennis, which is something that, again, I urge people to read Andrei Pekovic's piece, because she does talk about that quite a bit in the piece.
One of the big what-ifs of the tournament was Aryna Sabalenka, who lost to Mirra Andreeva in the quarterfinals. I mean, how much do you think whatever stomach issues she was having, was it more that caused her to lose, or was it how Andreeva was frustrating her that was more the deciding outcome of that match?
I mean, it's so hard to say, right? I mean, I'm not into Sabalenka's body. I don't know what it felt like, but she looked bloody awful. I mean, I'm just going to put it that way. I mean, she was struggling. There's no question about it. Would she have won the match without being sick? We don't know. We'll never know. But it certainly didn't help. There's no question about that. She was struggling, and it was on her mind the whole time. You're not really thinking clearly. Sometimes it can help you when you're not feeling well. It can sort of zone you in, and you don't carry on, and you don't. But this is a Grand Slam champion. She knows how to win these matches. I would go as far as to say if she wasn't ill, she probably would have won the match, but we'll never know. And you also got to give a lot of credit to Mirra, because she knew what was happening down the other end. She could see her doubled over. She could see her struggling. She saw the trainer out. And to be able to handle that moment as a 17-year-old and not be sort of like thinking about, oh, is she going to default? Because that's what you think. Is she going to keep playing? Oh, is she going to keep playing well? Is she not? Like, there's a lot you have to deal with. So for someone her age to be able to have dealt with that moment the way she did, I give her a ton of credit. So to answer the question, we'll never know.
We will never know. And it's one of those things that did fate intervene to prevent a blockbuster Roland Garros final? Because I have no doubt that if Sabalenka was well, she would have played Iga, and then I have a feeling Iga still would have won that match, but it may have been quite interesting to see what Aryna would have brought to that.
I still think Iga would have won. I mean, seeing the way she handled Rome, I think on that surface, it's very similar to Paris, whereas Madrid is a very different. It's altitude. Yeah. It supports more the big servers, the big flat hitters. And I think that was a little bit more, supportive of why Sabalenka played so close there and should have probably won that match. But look at how many times Rafa has won Madrid comparative to Barcelona, Monte Carlo, Rome. It's a different place. Madrid is not necessarily a good indicator of who's going to win the French.
No, definitely not. And we've seen that over the years.
Petra Kvitova won Madrid. Okay.
Yeah.
So Petra didn't even come close to winning the French Open.
I think she makes semis one year, lost to Kenin in 2020. But that was a weird year for Roland Garros. And even if she had made it, she probably wouldn't have beaten Iga in that final.
No.
But I guess looking at the bigger picture for Sabalenka, I think this result doesn't really change that much for her in terms of her form or her standing or how she's going to view herself. It's just going to be one of those unfortunate days. And, I don't think there's any kind of questions around Sabalenka after this loss.
No doubt. I mean, there's Kvitova, of course, winning, but look, Sabalenka knows how to win Grand Slams. She knows that she went into this match. It was very unlucky what happened to her. She will learn from it. She's had without question, she's had some ups and downs this year, mentally, physically, tragically, all the things that have happened. So I think it's only going to make her stronger going into the grass court season. I think she's going to be incredibly hungry, very much like Jannik Sinner. I think another thing that Andrea mentions in her piece is that Sinner did not look happy leaving the court. He was very unhappy. So I think that will, fuel his fire to want to come back and play well at Wimbledon. And certainly he's my favorite to win the US Open. I'm not quite sure about Wimbledon. But, for Sabalenka, she knows how to play well at Wimbledon. She hasn't gotten to the final there. And so I think that will certainly, really push her to want to be at her very best on grass. And grass is so different at Wimbledon. There's so many variables that happen in the first week with movement, with the court being soft and fast and, sort of, you can use the drop shot and all the stuff where the ball just dies on the really lush, beautiful green. Like this photo right here is without question the first day or two of the tournament. And then by the end of the tournament, it becomes a little bit more like a hard court. So, a lot of things can happen. And that's the beauty of grass is that it's, a truly natural surface that changes day in, day out, depending on the speed of the court, the weather, if they close the roof. There's a lot of variables that can happen at Wimbledon. But I think this woman on screen will be very much ready to go.
I think she's got to be one of the favourites, as is someone you already mentioned, Elena Rybakina. And, you said that, she's your favourite. And I can see why. And I'm actually at the point of agreeing with you, to be honest, looking at her form, winning Wimbledon before. I definitely believe that she can win a Grand Slam. But there's something enigmatic about Rybakina, not necessarily talking about the way she carries herself on court, although I do absolutely love the ice queen attitude that she has, that sort of poker face that maybe less often now, but it's definitely still there. But it seems to me that there's no doubt that her top level is world class and up there with Iga and Arena. But does it seem to come out less often than her rivals? I'm just thinking about what happened at Roland Garros, where she didn't quite produce a good enough level to put away Paolini.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it doesn't surprise me. On clay, the ball comes back more. And Rybakina is a big hitter, and she wants to win the point in the first 2 or 3 shots. And on clay, that is not the case. As I mentioned, it's why Serena didn't win as many French Opens as she won at Wimbledon, at the US Open. And it's a similar game in some respects. Serena obviously was incredible at the French Open, has had many, many, champion moments there and has won the tournament many times. Do I see Rybakina being able to do that? Probably not as much. Not certainly with Iga Swiatek hanging around on clay. But look, I think the bottom line is on grass, it's a whole different story. She doesn't have to play this type of a player, Paolini, on clay. If she plays a Paolini on grass, it's going to be 2-2, to Rybakina, because she's going to take advantage of the fact that she's the ball so flat and hard, and she can ace Paolini off the court. On clay, Paolini's 20 feet behind the baseline and running that serve down and lofting it back deep in the court and playing and forcing Rybakina to have to hit 2 or 3 shots to win the point, which she's capable of doing, and she certainly could have won this match. But at the I don't know what happened at 5-all in the third. She just went to Narnia. She made so many unforced errors she really gave the match to Paolini in a lot of ways because she made so many unforced errors. And that was the one thing that was a bit surprising for me. It was that she didn't think that this is the biggest moment in Jasmine Paolini's, life at that point, is that she didn't sort of recognize the ability to be able to take a step back a little bit and make her play a little bit more. But again, that's how she plays. She goes for it. So on grass, it's a different story because your mindset is totally different. You must go for it on grass. You must see the opening and you must hit it hard. And if you do that, you will win a lot of matches, which is why Petra Kvitova has won 2 Wimbledon titles. Very similar player, just a right-handed version. So I think that Rybakina for me is the favorite at Wimbledon because she's won it before. That's huge to know that you can do it again. There's nobody in the draw that can say that, right? And so Iga Swiatek, Halep, she won it 4 years ago. Is she going to be a factor? Probably not. I don't know who else is in the draw that's won the tournament.
Vondrousova?
Vondrousova, as the defending champion, but certainly not playing the tennis that we feel that she could to push again. Could she come back and play well? Look, this is a player that was like shocked she won Wimbledon last year. It's like, I don't even know how to win on grass before this. So could she have that? Yes, I believe she might be the only other player in the tournament that's won the tournament. So
yeah, she is.
So there you go. I mean, this is a player that, to me, if healthy and not sick and not injured, is a player to beat at Wimbledon because of the fact that she's done it before and won it before. And if she's
I remembered one other player.
Oh.
One other player, but she's not going to be a contender. Kerber.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So Nick, this is the way it is. She's the best player going into the tournament on that surface if she's at her best. And so for me, if she's playing well and she's confident, and she is reasonably, I think it's more about her health. And if she gets through the first week, which is what it's all about, she, to me, is the player to beat at Wimbledon.
Is she potentially overplaying by doing Berlin and Eastbourne? She seems to be the only one of the top women, like playing both.
Yes. I mean, Andrea Pekovic and I have talked about this on my podcast. And one of the things is we are flabbergasted and confused at her scheduling. I don't know who's choosing it for her, but it is not good. Case in point, the Australian Open. She played so well in Brisbane. She smoked Sabalenka in the final. Sabalenka had no chance in that final. None. And then she decides to pack up her bags and go to Adelaide and play a lead-in tournament to the Australian Open after just winning in Brisbane. Like, what are you doing? Pack your bags, get on a plane, go to Melbourne, go through your stuff, get prepared to play 2 weeks of hard-hitting heat struggles in Melbourne. You are absolutely the player to beat now going into the tournament. Everybody knows you just smoked the defending champ. I mean, just the thought process behind her going to Adelaide and then getting injured going into the Australian Open and having to struggle through her match and losing it to, obviously in one of the greatest tie breaks I've ever seen in my entire life. The name is skipping my mind right now. It'll come back to me. But Blinkova. To lose that match, to Blinkova, what? No, she should have been in the final at this tournament. She should have been playing possibly, Sabalenka again in the final. And instead she loses to Blinkova and she's injured. She's got a problem with her Achilles. There's all this. Who is choosing that schedule for you? That is ridiculous. So if it was me, I would be going to Berlin. I would be playing Berlin. I would try to win Berlin. And then I would go and prepare and practice at Orangi, at Wimbledon. And she can, because she's a member, to get ready for Wimbledon. So I don't understand this at all. It's not like she's played enough tennis. She talked a couple of weeks ago about being tired already. I'm tired, the schedule's long. What are you doing?
It does seem to be sort of almost Dominic Thiem syndrome on the men's side, where he definitely overplayed a bit. I mean, part of me wonders, we've got no evidence for this. This is all speculation. But no, there's a possibility that she's picking her own schedule and no one's saying no to her.
Maybe. Look, a lot of these top players get paid to go and to play these tournaments, but she doesn't need the money. Come on. The goal is to win Grand Slams, period. That's it. Win tournaments to get you prepared to go and rock up at a Grand Slam and know you're the best player possibly in that draw. And for me, look, if she played, Eastbourne is the week before. And look, I loved playing Eastbourne. It was one of my favorite tournaments of the year. But, to play Berlin and then play Eastbourne. And if she wins, let's say she wins one of them or both of them. And then she has, 12 hours to get to and play possibly her first round at Wimbledon. And then go 2 weeks playing 7 matches. It's not a good schedule. I mean, Serena won Wimbledon how many times? She never played a lead-up tournament. She just went straight to Wimbledon, and it's not to say that you don't need matches on grass. A lot of people do. And I'm a proponent for playing one tournament, at least as a warm-up on grass. But when you're a big hitter and you play like she does, she doesn't need a lot of matches on grass. She just needs to be serving well and returning well and feeling healthy. And that's been a bit of a struggle for her this year. So it's a schedule that I just don't understand. And the Australian Open is a perfect example of that.
Possibly also Dubai as well, having to put up for that, having done Abu Dhabi and Doha, reaching the finals. I think, we'll have to see, won't we? Maybe she'll see the light in part of Eastbourne. Maybe it's just in case I lose in Berlin first couple of rounds, which she did last year, because I think she lost to Vekic.
And some people do that. They do enter tournaments and then pull out, but that's not great for the tournament either. But look, the bottom line is for me, play Berlin, go to London, be done. Now, if she wins Berlin and Eastbourne and Wimbledon, I'm going to look like the biggest idiot and way to go. But it's just not something that I would do as her advisor or a coach, be telling her to do.
I don't think anyone's won 4 consecutive weeks on tour since Martina Navratilova.
Yeah, so there you go.
Probably
Well, it'll be
not.
3, but still.
Yeah, I actually haven't looked it up, so yeah, it probably was only the 3. But I guess one more name I want to throw out there before we wrap up is Ons Jabeur making the quarterfinals, and it's appropriate, I think, because obviously she's finalist for the last 2 years. There's this sort of desire among tennis fans to see her succeed and win a Grand Slam, and that French Open run to the quarterfinals, I don't think many people expected that. I think I certainly didn't have her in the quarters. I think I had her losing to who did I have her losing to? I think Ostapenko in my bracket. But she was in a tough section potentially with Ostapenko in there. Fernandez challenged her a bit. She went 3 sets with Osorio. There were a lot of question marks about her fitness, but she came through playing the spectacular tennis that we expect Jabeur to do, and then she pushed Gauff and came pretty close to getting that final set back on serve in that quarterfinal. So the simple question is Ons back?
Yeah, I think, look, that helped tremendous amount because she's been struggling all year long, hasn't looked great, and hasn't looked happy. I mean, for me, what I saw in Paris was a little bit more of a happier Ons Jabeur. So if I'm seeing that, and I need to see the entertainment value from her. I need to see the certain players that need, and Carlos Alcaraz is a perfect example of that. When he's smiling, he's having a good time, he's playing his best. And that's not to say you're yucking it up on the court. I don't want to see hamming it up, hitting tweeners and all that sort of stuff. I just want to see you enjoy what you're doing. And for Ons, she needs to be enjoying what she's doing. And that's what I saw a lot more from her at the French. So I know she's happy going onto the grass. This is her favorite surface. She can use her creativity. She can use the drop shot. She can use coming into the net, her flat forehand, her flat backhand, her slice backhand, all the things that she does so well, her slider serve, all the things that she does really well really lend itself to grass. And one of the other things that I talked to Andy Roddick about in my podcast, The French Connection, was that he said, oh, clay was a difficulty and blah, blah, blah. He said, but then I rock up to the grass courts and I'm like, oh, I'm back to being the best player in the world. You know what I mean? Or number 2, he would say, because of course Roger was still there. But that's how Ons feels. Ons feels when she gets on the grass, she is undoubtedly, arguably, best player on grass, outside of maybe Rybakina on a good day. Obviously, she lost to Vondrousova, but I think that Ons Jabeur absolutely is top 3 player on grass. So if she can stay healthy and happy, I think that she's without question going to be a player to beat at Wimbledon again. And the crowd love her there, and they're so supportive of her. It's sort of similar to the great late, amazing Jana Novotná losing the amount of time she did and then finally getting that win over Natalie Torsia in the final, is that everyone was pulling for her to win that tournament. So I think Ons Jabeur will have the support of the crowd, and as long as she's happy and playing well, and the draw lends itself for her, then she's for sure has the capability of getting to another Wimbledon final. But it's all about matchups and it's all about the draw.
Definitely.
And people feel that way they do about Swiatek. And I think that's right. I think that absolutely she's not the favorite for Wimbledon.
I think Wimbledon is pretty close. And I think someone else in the comments said before, Wimbledon's had a few kind of random winners in the past, like in the last 2 years, like Rybakina and Vondrousova were very much unexpected winners, and you wouldn't have predicted either of them to win Wimbledon the years that they won it, and now they're established champions. Yeah. I guess my question is, like, going into grass, are there any other players that we should be kind of keeping an eye on?
Look, the usual suspects, the big hitters, the Maddie Keys. The problem with Maddie is that just the emotions take over her a little bit and she sort of gets a little bit too tight, but she should be doing so much better than she does in certain circumstances. Just her shot selection at times is just not great. But no, I think the usual suspects will be there. Ons, I think we'll see what Marketa can do to see if she can figure out the magic again. But Rybakina, I think Swiatek will do well again. I think she's learning how to play better on grass. She lost to the eventual winner last year. We'll see what Jessica Pegula can do coming back from injury. We know that she loves to play on the faster courts, grass. She was ever so close to being in a final last year. A match she will regret for possibly the rest of her career if she doesn't end up being in a final of a Grand Slam or winning one. So I'd like to see Jess doing well. We'll see what Coco can do. She has no points to defend there. She loves playing on grass. It was not a good start for her. Maria Sakkari, if she can break through and finally get through some big matches on at Grand Slam level. But, this player on screen, Maddie, has a huge serve, huge game, and she's done very well at Wimbledon through the years. So I don't know. But I think the usual suspects will be there at the end. May throw in a random like Sophia Kenin or, like Jess Pegula. So we'll see. Americans certainly are pretty good on the old grass as well.
See what Andreeva can do, because she seems to have come back pretty strong and was looking pretty good on grass last year.
I would like to see Andreeva. I think Andreeva can be a good grass court player as well. She's so talented. So I'm looking, and she has a very good serve, and that's something that we don't talk about enough on grass, is having a good serve. Something that, of course, we know Rybakina and Sabalenka have a lot of.
It's interesting you're saying about the serve, actually. So this is going a slight tangent from where I was expecting to go with this, but I actually want to ask you about this as someone who has played before, who has coached people. Some of the discourse I've had around with Andreeva is that people think that she's underpowered, and that she has, like you've mentioned, a good serve. I'm not seeing that. I think she's got really good strokes, but I wanted to kind of get your kind of spin on it. Is she going to hit bigger as she gets older, or is this just her game? And actually, are we just underappreciating again what she can do? Because I love watching her play and read the court and use her tennis IQ. That's how she beat Sabalenka.
I think she'll get a little bit stronger and she'll start hitting the ball a little bit bigger, but you don't necessarily have to do that to win. You just have to hit the ball and place the ball well and create your shots and use your drop shots, use your creativity. She has a very good stroke production. And so if you have very good stroke production, which she does, for example, I'm sure Coco Gauff would love to have her forehand stroke production, a little bit more. But, Coco puts the high spin on the ball. There are variables that help Coco. High topspin forehand, flat big backhand. And those two differences are really hard for a lot of players to deal with. Andreeva plays that very classic sort of all-court, good hitting, great mover, very good stroke production. And I think as she gets older and stronger, she will hit the ball a little bit harder. But that's also not really necessarily how she's going to win matches. How she wins matches is being able to outplay people. And, she hits the ball, you could say, arguably bigger than Ons Jabeur. And Ons has been in, multiple Grand Slam finals now, 2 at Wimbledon and 1 at the US Open. So I think that her stroke production will allow her to start hitting the ball even bigger. And she's just going to be really good. There's not a lot of cracks in her game. And, as Billie Jean King always says, bad technique breaks down under pressure, and she doesn't have bad technique on really anything. So she's only going to get better.
That's what the exciting thing about her is. I agree with you. I haven't seen anything obvious about her game that could cause her problems. It's all very solid. It's all very well rounded, and that's very impressive for someone her age.
It was just here for her. So that's getting better and better now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like 17 years old, being in your first Grand Slam semi-final. Maybe it was too much too quick, but she beat Sabalenka. So I guess we'll have to see how she goes. She's definitely not going to have that situation happen to her again. I don't see her having that same nerves when she's back in another Grand Slam semi-final.
No.
I guess one more name I want to throw out there, because a very popular name with viewers of the channel, but also someone who's had a very good season, well, sort of quarter of the season so far. How do you see Danielle Collins's final grass court swing going?
Actually, we didn't talk about Danielle doing well at Wimbledon. I think she's a real threat, without question. Huge serve, massive ground strokes, decent mover. She had someone like Coco's movement or Iga's movement, maybe even a better player. But what she's shown this year, phenomenal. I think she goes into Wimbledon. Obviously, she knows it's her last ever Wimbledon. So there'll be some nerves there in some way. But on the other way, there is no doubt that she can threaten at Wimbledon. I just completely forgot about her. So I think that there's absolutely no doubt, given the draw and given certain circumstances, Danielle Collins is not anyone that anyone wants to play on any given day, for all the reasons we know. She's a great player. She's an amazing competitor, and she is a pain in the ass to play against. So she's going to have the support or not of the crowd. She doesn't care. She just wants to, do her best, and that's what we will get from Danielle. So I would love to see her in the latter parts of Wimbledon. I think there's no funnier or better storyline, and there's just no one more sort of interesting to go and watch, because you just never know what's going to come out of her mouth, and certainly don't know how she's going to play. But I freaking love Danielle Collins. I'm just going to put it out there, as we call her Danimal. And so, Danielle is, on a fast court, look out, because if she's serving well, we know that she can pummel the return. So if you don't play well against Danielle and you don't exploit her movement, you are going to be in trouble. So absolutely, she's somebody that we haven't talked about enough, going into Wimbledon as maybe one of the favorites. And she's made a Grand Slam final, and that makes a huge difference for a player. She knows how to manage 7 matches in a Grand Slam. She lost that tough two-setter against Ash Barty, but I don't think anyone was going to beat Ash Barty in that Australian Open, certainly with the crowd behind them. So I think Danielle will be there's no doubt she'll be a threat at Wimbledon.
No doubt at all. Yeah, I agree with you there. And that's the answer that a lot of us wanted to hear, as with a lot of your other answers on this podcast today. Renee, thank you so much for coming on and bearing with us during this. And it's always great having you on WTA Weekly to talk about this absolutely fantastic sport that and spectacle that is being produced by the likes of Iga and Coco, Arena and Elena and Danielle, and all the other names that we mentioned. So
you're
really
welcome.
appreciate you coming on. Thank you so
much. For my pod, I had my Wimbledon trophies here, so I'm very much ready for the tournament to go. Sadly, it's not the singles, but I'll take the doubles any day. But thanks for having me, Nick. It's a pleasure, and I cannot wait. It's always a bit of a letdown, after the Grand Slams are over. But I am pumped. Heading over to Europe very soon myself to get ready for Wimbledon, and I cannot wait. And so I appreciate all your listeners, and catch us on at ESPN for Wimbledon. We are so excited to be back. We've got all new studios, so there's all this new fun that's going to be happening at Wimbledon for us, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to be back there. It is my, I don't like to say my favorite because I love all the Grand Slams, but it's my favorite.
Oh, it's my favorite too. No, I'm not ashamed to say it. I mean, it does help I'm British. Yeah. It does help. Yeah. It's what I grew up with.
Exactly.
I will never not love it. And don't play down doubles. Coco Gauff's not playing down her doubles trophy right now.
That's right.
That's for sure.
That's right. But, unusually, it's usually the other way around. You usually win a doubles title, and then you go on to win singles like Ash Barty did, Azarenka won mixed doubles Grand Slams. There's a lot of players that won doubles before singles. So I think it's phenomenal that she was able to get that done again. And I'm super pumped that she still plays doubles. And for anyone out there that teaches children, the kids or young people, tennis, and they want them to be successful, make them play doubles. It will only make them better singles players. There is no doubt in my mind. So there you go. There's my PSA for the day. All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Renee. Really appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah. I'm just going to do quick plugs for here whilst Renee goes. But I'm just going to say that obviously we've got some tournaments coming up this week. That looks very strange, doesn't it? Some tournaments coming up this week. We've got John bring us everything from Rosmalen. We've got tournament going on in Nottingham as well in the 250, and we're all very much looking forward to Berlin, as we have live footage of John eating his dinner. So want to say, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed and hearing Renee's thoughts, which I thought were excellent as always. We'll be back with WTA Weekly next week to round up Nottingham and Rosmalen, and we'll be looking forward to the blockbuster 500 that's happening in Berlin, with all the top 10 there. So thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you then. Until then, take care and keep talking tennis.
Ready? Play.
My name is Clara Towson, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
I am Francisca George, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Susan Leemans, and I'm a friend of the show.
My name is Zainab Sammaz, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hey guys, my name is Sasha Vickery, and I'm a friend of the show.
Boom.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Harris, and I'm a friend of the show.
Perfect.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Paolini, and I'm a friend of the show.
Wow, Jasmine, you got it in one time.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.